This is Damian Macy, representing the Friends of the Library for Marshall's Public Library, and we're representing the Oral History Project. Today is Wednesday, June the 15th of 2016, and I have the honor of being today with Mr. Ben Hammond, who's a lifelong resident of Clark County and lived in not only Marshall area, but also a lot of history in Westfield. So with that, I'm sure we'll hear some interesting facts from Ben. With that, you're on, Ben.
I, Benjamin Lanson Hammond, was born July the 5th, 1928, on a small farm about 5 or 6 miles northwest of Clarksville, Dawson Township. Father, Frederick Lanson Hammond. Mother, Eula Catherine Nee Stevenson Hammond. Older brother, Frederick Howell Hammond. Older sister, Nellie Lucinda Hammond. In 1930, a brother, Riley Allen Hammond, born in 1934. A sister, Roxana Lee Hammond, completed the family. She was born, I think, in 1934. Completed the family. As we grew up, we were schooled at a one-room schoolhouse 2 miles away, West Liberty. Our place was on dirt roads, north, south, east, or west, bad roads. The Clarksville Road was a mile south, and it was not much better. All 8 classes were taught by Grace Nee Buckler Watt, husband Nolan, and one son my age, Shelby. High school in Westfield in 1941. No buses. 22 in my freshman class. I graduated in 1946. War, moving in and out, I don't know what I did that for, by other families. And graduation saw 14 of us, 8 girls and 6 boys. As country kids, we learned to drive early on farms. Some way we made our way. No college for most.
Ben, when you were growing up at home, did you have some errands and particular things that you had to do around the house? Around the farm?
Oh, of course.
What were some of those things?
Well, we milked a couple of cows. Dad didn't like to milk them. We had hogs to feed. We butchered 6 hogs when the family was all together every fall when that time came. Neighbors helped neighbors. And gardening I didn't like, but Mother had a garden. And
You like to eat it though, I'll bet.
oh yes, of course.
Did you have some things that you liked particularly, and did Mother fix those for you to take to school for lunch?
Well,
I know you didn't have a cafeteria at school.
I don't really recall a lot, but it was pretty common food, but plenty of it.
Okay.
Mother baked bread twice a week, homemade loaves and biscuits. We'd come home from school, and me and my brother, younger brother, and sister were still in grade school. And Mom baked, I think, on Tuesdays and Fridays. We would come in hungry, grab a loaf of fresh bread, cut the heel off of one loaf. The other child would cut the heel off the other end of that. Not allowed to take the second loaf and cut it off, so you cut the side off of the first loaf.
So you like that heel or the crust?
Because it would hold up and you could put whatever you had jelly, homemade jelly jam.
Jams tasted pretty good on that, didn't they?
That, and it, it held pretty good. You didn't have to use a plate. So, Dad hated the milk. We had 2 cows, and I milked some. Got my thumb about tore off because we had 1 cow, Roan, and she'd kick the bucket about the time you got it ready to empty in a bigger container, and then so I thought I'll fool her. So I got one of those sorghum cans, metal can, and was milking in it. And about the time it was getting heavy enough to empty it, she kicked that and cut the whole ball off of my thumb. You can still see the scar.
I'll bet she was a friend of yours then, wasn't she?
Oh my, you reckon. But I helped with the gardening. We all younger kids did. By that time, my older brother was on his own, and my sister married her husband, and she was gone by the time before I was out of high school, really. So.
You mentioned walking to school, and there were no school buses. I know that.
And it was 2 miles.
You didn't come home for lunch then, did you?
No, you carried your lunch.
Were there some things that you remember about West Liberty School?
Well, it had a big stove, heating stove with a frame or shell around it. And in bad weather, why you arrive there, if you didn't get to ride it somehow, we were hauled sometimes, but most of the time it was shank mare, as we called it. So you had that to warm your feet and hands and clothes, best you could. But then going home, same thing. You drive home.
Get a little chilly before you got there.
Of course, some of those winters were pretty bad. It was Depression time too, and nobody really had much, but we survived. So,
you mentioned going from there to Westfield High School.
That's where I went to high school.
Was there some particular subjects that you really liked, or some that you didn't
Well, I
like?
wasn't fond of history.
You were, okay.
But spelling, I was a whiz. I really liked it. If I didn't make 100, that's the last thing we had in the school day was audible spelling for everybody. Teachers stood and read off words, and if I didn't make 100 on that, I was pretty upset with myself. But I did all right in arithmetic, but I never did, when I got to high school, understand algebra. I just never did understand it.
I don't think you were alone either.
Well, probably not.
Would you say then math was one of your least liked subjects?
Ordinary math, I didn't do too bad. I figured things differently. If I had 19 times 19, in my head I would take 20 times 19, and that I could subtract 19 from that in my head and get the answer. Teachers didn't like that. They wanted you to know the multiplication tables, but that didn't interest me at the time much. But I did all right.
Good. Sounds like you made it through just fine.
I made it through somehow. So,
okay, I think we were up there in 1946. You said you
All right.
graduated from high school.
well, if I can put a little in there before that,
Sure.
I've got quite a bit. After schooling was over, I helped my father farm, worked on a hay baler and so forth, tried to save money, mowed Melvin and Annie Mars Banner's yard, big yard, with a push mower. Dad and I attended a farm sale where a 1928 Chevy Coupe was for sale. I was high bidder. I'd saved enough money, about $65, and I got it for $59, nearly all I had. It had a push-pull ignition switch, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the armored cable ignition. Well, they'd short out, so they just had a push-pull switch. Anybody could steal it if they had the idea. And 4-cylinder motor. Tires were 4 1/4 by 20s, and on split rims, if you ever remembered them. To change a tire, you put this 3-cornered thing on there and cranked it, and it pulled it together. And I only had 3 good tires in World War II, you know. It was okay on dirt roads, which we had from home for a mile in any direction. The only time they were really solid was in the summer or frozen in the winter. Dust ankle deep in the summer.
Don't you wish you maybe had that car today?
I know where the frame is.
It probably has some value.
You haven't heard all this story yet.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, gravel caused blowouts when you had booted tires. Finally, after the war, got better tires. One of my first jobs was as a janitor after high school for Bishop and Gross, a car dealer in Paris, Illinois, where my older brother was a mechanic, Fred. I saw no future there, so tried the cowboy boot factory in Paris. First as a fancy stitcher, double needle machine, and then as a sewing machine mechanic. And after a few weeks of that, I tried to save $5 a week, but they'd lay you off every whip stitch. And I was renting a room for $5 a week, and I wasn't gaining anything. So, no future there either. Then I worked on a farm south of Kansas, Illinois. This farmer actually farmed 2 farms, his home place and another east of Brockton, Illinois. Room and board, $85 a month. This was the spring and summer. And fall of 1947. He had hogs and 2 milk cows. His wife, Leah, taught school. They had one son, 10, 11 years old, and the owner had a brother who was not fully functional mentally, who he had to keep, which was a stipulation to get to own the home place farm. So, up at 3:30, 4 o'clock a.m., get a cold breakfast, milk the 2 cows, and then start working. Get your own dinner, which I liked because the boss would send me in to fix dinner, and we ate. And Leah, his wife, would have a good supper for all. Bed at 8 p.m. or so, and repeat the next day. The owner, farmer, wanted to be in the fields early, which was a difficult thing to do at the farm east of Brockton. I don't get lost here. One of my first jobs in Paris was as a janitor for Bishop and Gross, a car dealer in Paris, Illinois, where my older brother, Fred, was a mechanic. Did I cover that already?
Yes.
I did. I lost my way. I had these pages numbered, but they've been shuffled a little. Okay. After my schooling was over, I helped my father farm. Worked on a hay baler and so forth. Tried to save money. Mowed Melvin and Annie Mars Boehner's big yard with a push mower. Dad and I attended a farm sale where a 1928 Chevy Coupe was for sale. I was high bidder, $59, nearly all I had. It had a push-pull ignition switch. Our 4-cylinder motor, tires 4 1/4 by 20, and only 3 good ones. World War II, you know. Okay on dirt roads, which we had from home for a mile in any direction, but gravel caused blowouts. Finally, after the war, got better tires. Yeah, maybe I already covered this, I'm not positive. And this farmer in the fall of 1947, did I cover that? He had hogs, 2 milk cows. His wife Leah taught school. Did I cover that?
Yes.
Okay. I thought I had this all figured out. Poison ivy does not bother me much, but it did my boss, Richard Allen. So after the corn was laid by, I hand scythed the horse weeds and cut out the ivy. I've been by the farm, and the ivy is gone, probably sprayed now. Corn harvest, good crops. He had borrowed a new mounted picker to open up the fields. Things went okay until we filled one slatted crib, then moved the new type hiker to a metal round crib, and he did not follow my advice while setting up the hiker. He was always in a hurry. Had a couple of fingers off on one hand from trying to adjust a running chain before I ever worked for him. And when the thing I had said might happen did. Words were said. He fired me. I quit. Then he said, "How will I get my harvesting done?" I said, "I don't care," with a few cuss words thrown in. And left. Fall and winter of 47 and 48, I stayed with my older sister Cindy, her husband on a small rented farm. They had 1 son and a daughter north of Westfield, about 2 miles. Helped get their corn harvested. It was down bad. I had met a 15-year-old Westfield girl, Irma Jean Edwards, and courted her. Her home was in southwest corner of Westfield. And then I walked about 2 miles to my sister's northwest of Westfield, facing a cold northwest wind. I slept on one of those old click sofas, common in those times. I don't know how many people might even remember them. "1948 came. I worked for a farmer near Westfield and his older father, Winston and Willis Drake, father. Each paid me $17.50 a week. Then I worked in the oil field, south of Westfield. I liked that. Most did not. The smell and dirty work. Irma Jean, 16 now, and I, 20. Were married August the 1st, 1948. Stayed a short time with her parents while we fixed up a big old 2-story house with basement, which with help We bought and made $50 a month payments on it. Had food, water, so forth bills also. Both of us now working at Brown Shoe Company, Charleston, Illinois. I, shipping clerk, $35 a week. Irma, sock liner, piecework. Together, we were just making it. Then, expecting a baby. So, I had to find a better paying job. A young neighbor worked at Ralph Foundry in Martinsville, Illinois. I was hired there too. First day on the job, my sister came to tell me Irma was in Paris Hospital delivering our baby. I left as soon as I got off work and was in time to see our first daughter, Brenda Kay, arrive. May 14th, 1951. Dr. George Mitchell. Laid off from Ralph Foundry in the fall. Hired by Dale and Bill Sinclair, implement dealers in Martinsville. $40 a week. Driving from Westfield. In February 1952, Castle Ryder and his wife were expecting a baby and help needed in his furniture store and appliance business. So hired me. Could walk 2 blocks to work, no driving. Our second daughter, Linda May, was born May the 30th, 1952. Dr. George, Paris Hospital. Castle and Jen Ryder's daughter, born in June. I was employed for over 8 years by Ryder's. Television was new. Maybe 5 or 6 TV sets in the whole town. One snowy station to receive, Channel 6, WFBM, Indianapolis.
And as I recall, Ben, with that distance of television, you had to have really a monstrous antenna or something on the roof to even get a snowy picture, too.
Oh my.
Right?
What, you didn't get reception all the time. You just got some come in once in a while, you know.
I'm saying even you had to have a big antenna to
Yeah,
even
well,
get
you
that.
had to have a Yagi, which most
Yep.
people don't know what it is. Maybe you do.
I do.
Well, anyway. But that changed rapidly. Ryder sold Philco, later Zenith, all tube sets then. Quickly, more stations, better reception. Channel 10 Terre Haute, Channel 3 Champaign in the mid-1950s. Ryder sold but had no service. I wanted him to get in or get out, but no. So, in my spare time and my vacation, I went to Terre Haute, Indiana, to Walker Electric, and the Zenith distributor, and picked the brains of Carl Youngblood, the head serviceman there. I taught myself how to use schematics and so forth. Learned on the job. Nice. Since Ryder wanted to sell but not service, I made evening service calls. Cass felt I was working against my job. Some guys, when called, would replace more tubes than really was necessary to pad the bill. I did only what was needed, necessary. Cass had a store in Kansas, Illinois, too. I worked for Ryder, though, until he retired By this time, Irma and I had 4 children. Son Benjamin, my namesake, born 1955, and Frederick William, named after his 2 grandfathers, as I was, and Brenda and Linda. I had to have a job after he retired. I was hired July the 20th, 1960, by U.S. Industrial Chemical Company at Tuscola, Illinois. In the 5+ years there, shift work and carpooling, we bought the 2 Ryder buildings. The smaller one, it was a 2-story one, contract for deed, $100 a month, with $1,800 total.
And those buildings were in downtown Westfield.
Right across from the bank. Now that may be all I have written out, actually. But I can go ahead and dictate, I guess, as best I can. Anyway, I wanted to have most of it all done.
Why don't you describe what Westfield, let's say in the 1960s, what was downtown and what it looked like?
It was pretty nice little town, good people, probably 700 or so population, and kind of stayed that way, but of course with time, a lot of businesses folded. You know, still had about the same number of people, but you had to go other places to shop. Casey was 11 miles away. Charleston was about 12 or 15. So that's where you had to go. When we bought the smaller building, which is still there, I moved the television shop from our basement of the old house there. And Irma was kind of shy, but when I was working at USI, she had to take calls and kind of got experience of dealing with the public, and it worked pretty well. Then about, I think it was 1963, 64, I cashed some of my Franklin insurance policy and put in 3 brand new snooker tables, pool tables, in the downstairs of the smaller building. And it went well for quite a while. The next year I went back to St. Louis in my truck and bought another table with rails that I could put on any of the tables and make a billiard table out of it. I love snooker. I was pretty good at it. And let's see, I lost my way here. But anyway, about 1968, we had built ourselves a nice apartment above the pool hall and moved the TV business out of the downstairs into the corner of the larger furniture store building, which was 2-story, 42 by 80. So, had more room, had room to expand into furniture and appliances as best we could, Maytag and Kraler furniture and so forth, and went along fairly well until the pool room business kind of went south, you might say. People got tired of it. The high school was failing, and eventually, of course, merged with Casey, which it still is. But somehow we made it. We both worked hard. After the children got out of school, and Brenda and Linda, and I think Benjamin, older boy, and I believe Fred even went to college. Benjamin turned out to be an electronic engineer, didn't know how to fix radios or TVs when he would come home, but he was in the other end of the business. And he worked for a company in St. Louis for, my gosh, I think 20, 25 years. And that's what he still does, but I think for a different company now. Fred is pretty good on electronics, and of course neither one of them ever learned to do what I did, which was repair the stuff that was already designed and working. But Fred is one of the drivers of the company of, what the hell is Paris? Simonton Windows.
Oh, yeah.
And they are, I forget how many units they make every day. And he has a good job. Our older daughter had no children, but was married. She had endometriosis, and she's been gone now 6, 7 years. The other daughter got married. I think they had, her and Aaron had 3 children, a boy and 2 girls, and he got cancer of the esophagus a few years ago and is gone. But out of our 4 children, only 2 had offspring. But the grandchildren made up for it, I guess you'd say. I think we now have an unbelievable 19 or 20 great grandchildren. What happened? And of course we love them all, and none of them are too far away. In fact, one granddaughter teaches right here in Marshall.
Mindy Allen.
Mindy.
Okay.
Mindy Livingston. Allen was her married name, but I think her and Shane are divorced now, so that's the way it goes. But
You mentioned a couple of major brand names, Philco and Zenith,
yes,
which I don't think they're even in existence anymore, the
no,
companies anyway.
everything's Japanese.
Yep.
now. And that's what happened to my television servicing. That people would buy a TV from Walmart for less money than I could come out and repair the console set. They went to modules, and that main board, which failed, they didn't want the service people to work on. They wanted to put it a different way, exchange them, and send the bad one in. And for a time, they were repaired at a plant right there west of Paris.
Yeah.
Then it got where that wasn't there. People in Kansas worked there, as well as Westfield. And I heard remarks that they wouldn't buy this brand or that brand because they saw how they were made. That made me mad, and I said, well, if that's the way you are doing your job, what makes you think Sylvania, RCA, and these others aren't doing the same thing? You know.
But you touched on a thing, it seems like everything today, we're in such a throwaway society,
right.
You don't repair anything.
That's right, and we complain about where are we going to have our landfill.
Exactly. And
Figure it out, I can't.
you touched on something that, made so much sense. When you could repair it, you did. And even a car, you can't
That's the
repair
way I
your
was
own
brought
car
up.
anymore. Sure. But
My dad would say if something broke, it ain't worth a D this way. We just as well fix it or tear it up. That's what we did.
But it's not just televisions. It seems like anything
Everything
anymore.
seems that way.
You drop it in the trash can and then go buy a new one.
Yeah, and then, as I say, complain about what are we going to do with our trash.
Do you have an answer for that?
No, I don't. No.
Put it in the jug. Put it in the jug and back up new.
That's not right.
That's what, well, you've got the junk to dispose of. It has to go somewhere. Go over there west of Charleston and look up to the north. There's a mountain over there where you just run out of valleys and low places to fill in, and finally you stack it up high.
Ben, in your careers and different things that you have done, is there a person or persons who's really kind of influenced you, or you feel may have been a significant person in your life?
Well, I'm sure there have been many, and different occupations, but I was, as I said, taught by my dad, if it's not working, it's not worth a D that way, so let's either tear it up or fix it. And we learned how to fix a lot of things that you wouldn't think you could fix. And once you learned that, that was an advantage. The disadvantage was that people would always asking you to do things for them. And naturally, sometimes you didn't get paid. I probably lost $500 or so a year in bad debts, you know. I even had one guy in Kansas, the father of the guy that owed me. I stopped to see if the son was there, and I kind of said a bad word when I found out he wasn't. And this guy was off of the truck, right, and had a knife right up against my neck, that quick. And I apologized for what I had said, and wasn't worth getting your throat cut for $50 or $60. So that happened a lot. I had people that would buy things from me. One lady bought $500 and some worth of furniture and got behind on her payments, working right there in Westfield. And I went over at noon and talked to her, and she said that she would do something, and she did. I umpired softball. I was umpire in chief of the KZ Truckers for a long time. Me and Bob Simmons, rural carrier, worked with Thermogene, was in her class, and we had a couple ball games at KZ, softball, fast pitch. Next morning I saw a older fella, old Tom Teft we called him, and he said his neighbor moved out. I said, oh? And she had moved that night. She said she knew she was moving, but she never told me that. And I couldn't find where she went for 6 months, but she took the furniture she owed for and moved to Kansas City, Missouri. Hell, I wasn't going to go to Kansas City and not get anything back. It was just, that's the way it was, see? That happened, not often, but probably $500 or so worth
But Ben,
a
don't
year.
you think today people are even more likely to do that? They just don't simply have the
I
respect
don't think
for...
that human nature has changed a whole lot.
No, that's what I'm saying. I think it's probably even...
You were in
become worse.
business, so I don't know what your experience was, but
But I just think the respect for authority everywhere, all the way through, has
yeah.
declined.
I loved to hunt and loved to shoot a rifle or hunt pheasants. I don't see why anybody needs or has any use for one of these semi-automatic weapons. I don't understand it. They shouldn't be allowed to even have them. Even people who are dependable and honest and truthful.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know what's
A
going
gun
on.
is one thing, but these big assault rifles and stuff, that's a completely different.
Who needs something that'll shoot 50 bullets a minute or something?
Don't think there's many needed unless you're on the battlefield.
Well, I don't know.
With the You mentioned some things you like to shoot. What about hobbies and things that you?
Well, I was a pretty fair pool player. Snooker was my game. And I loved to play that game. And that was the main thing that I did. This is probably not something that might ought to be even told here, but I had fellows in Westfield. One guy from Kansas, he didn't like to get beat. I don't know if you ever, did you ever know John Redmond over to Paris?
Mm-hmm.
He came in a lot after I opened that pool room up. One day he said, I don't think it's fair. What ain't? I said, he said, you just get to shoot all you want to. And I only get to shoot once in a while. I said, well, John, what do you think ought to be done? He said, well, I think you ought to just be allowed to shoot twice. I don't know if you ever played snooker.
No, I didn't.
Well, in snooker, you have 10 red balls. And when you make one, then you can make any number of balls you can, 2 through 7. You want to make as many points as you can. If you make a numbered ball legally, then you make another red ball and so on until you miss or whatever. So he said, I think you ought to just get to shoot twice. I said, all right. If I shoot a red ball and make it, then I can shoot a numbered ball, make it or miss it. Yep. I said, okay. And he was a good customer and a good guy. So I said, all right, how about if I shoot a red ball and I miss, don't make it? Do I get to legally shoot another red ball? Yeah, you get to shoot twice. Okay. So I could shoot a red ball, maybe a numbered ball, and then that was it. Total 8 points. If I made a red ball, 1 point, and a 7 ball, 7 points. Then it was his inning, his turn. After some time of that, and he couldn't beat me, only about maybe 2 or 3 out of 10 games, he said, I don't think I'm being fair with you. I said, no. Well, what do you suggest now? He said, I think you ought to get to shoot as long as you make whatever, but you have to bank every other ball. I said, all right. It was about the same. If I were shooting good, I could bank a red ball, make a numbered ball, bank a red ball, make a numbered ball, so on. And he might win 2 or 3 out of 10 games. Well, then one day he said, this is not working. I said, well, now what? He said, I think you ought to have to bank every other ball. I said, well, okay. So I was playing really well. You have good days and bad days at the game. So I was going along really well one day, and I banked a red ball, and then I banked a numbered ball, and then I banked a red ball, and aimed that down on another numbered ball, and he put his cue out in front of me. He said, wait a minute, that's a foul. I said, what's a foul? He said, you're supposed to bank every other ball. Not every ball.
Making rules up to suit his own game, wasn't he?
And of course I just laughed, and but we had really good business in the pool parlor. High school was still there, and the kids would come in after school. It was a good clean game, but people could make it something else, and they did sometimes.
Ben, you mentioned you had 2 buildings. You said one of them was still there.
Yeah, it is. The one we lived in, the upstairs, and the one that had the concrete floor with the wood floor over it, that had the pool hall in it. Originally, it was a restaurant for a lot of years. But originally, when we had it, it was just where I had the TV business. Moved it out of the basement of the old house that we lived in 20 years into that, and she got experience of dealing with the public. And I don't know how it was in your business, but sometimes if I didn't get to somebody to service their whatever as quickly as they thought, she'd tell me that they called and chewed her out. I said, well, tell them, you know, that chew me out. And they wouldn't chew me out. So,
But you said one of the buildings was still there. What happened to the other one?
well, in about a week or two, this is a long story, but the bigger building, over time, me and my boys and some hired carpenter work from a guy from Kansas built 4 all-electric, fully carpeted apartments for rent. It was originally lodge number 644 of the Odd Fellows when we got our hands on the building. So that's what had been there. And the stairway was 37 steps from sidewalk, big wide stairway up to the 2nd floor and to the apartment we lived in for 20 years. So about less than a week before the attack on the World Trade Center, you probably know Kenny Rankins.
No, I know who
You
he
don't?
is.
Okay, he lived right here. He lived right south of us when we first bought a lot there at Mill Creek Village. And he was a wonderful guy, but he was more of a loner than I. He didn't like, he even had a sign down there at his lane, which is south of the one where you come up to our place. No trespassing. And I never will forget, after we had bought our lot, I drove up his lane one day, hadn't met him, and he come out and gave me a killing look, like, what are you doing up here? Can't you read? But when I got acquainted with him, he was just, his wife was Pat, and I think she was married to somebody before she married Kenny. But anyway, he was a real good neighbor to us. After so many years, though, he sold that place right south of us, and Larry Yargus, and his bought it eventually, but not from Kenny, and they've got a mansion there. I don't. But Kenny bought some property southeast of us and moved in there. I can't think what the road is.
So when did you move from Westfield to Marshall?
We moved out there to Mill Creek Village, end of October 1988.
Okay.
So we've been there ever since. This has got nothing to do, I guess, with my so-called experiences and history or whatever, but a lot of people like to travel. I don't care much for it. I try to stay where I know and am known and deal with people right there. And what I have said is, if I traveled and saw some place that I would just have to have someplace else, but could not afford to do that, what would I do? I'm the same way with the ladies. If I saw another woman that appealed to me more than Irma Jean and couldn't have her, that would be miserable.
I think you're in
my
luck,
mind.
Irma Jean. I think you're in luck.
Well,
You think so?
I am too.
Didn't something happen to that other building that you?
About a week or two before the attack
got
on the
911?
World Trade Center, one stroke of lightning hit. And it was 45 minutes before any flames came through the hole it blew in the new roof. And they wouldn't even let me go inside. If I had it to do over, I'm telling you, excuse my English, but there'd have been a hell of a fight. They wouldn't even let me go in the building. And my son-in-law, that owns the house right north of us out here at Mill Creek Village, Mike Rockman, was there, him and Brenda, for homecoming, right at homecoming time. And he said he helped the volunteer fire department, Westfield, finally Marshall, Casey, I don't know, and out west, Hutton. They all came and hauled water and shot water on that brand new roof. He even brought a bucket truck up finally from Casey, and the roof slopes to the west, and they shot water on that new roof, and it just ran off to where it was burning away 10 feet at a time. There were trusses underneath that old roof, great big wooden trusses. I was under that roof. I was under the roof of the building that's still there. I crawled all over them places, fixing and checking and doing, insulating.
So did the lightning then smolder enough for a while then before it
For about 40 or 45 minutes,
Yeah.
a little smoke wisp would come up through this hole that blew in the roof. Two of the guys, and I knew everybody from Westfield, not together, but one at a time, individually, got up on the TV building roof, which was about waist high lower than the furniture store roof, and looked at the smoke coming out of that hole. But they never ever put a hose up there or chopped a hole so they could. We had insurance on the place, but what I had historically done, I would borrow $15,000, $20,000 so I wouldn't owe too much, and had enough insurance to cover what I might lose if that happened before I got done. And the insurance company paid every penny plus $3,000 loss of income on the apartments. But my loss was about $200,000 to $250,000. And we got $52,000 out of it. The building's still there. The building that we lived in, it's still there.
So was that the time, okay, so you were living in Mill Creek then though, before 9/11?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we moved in October 1988.
Yeah.
And I was 3 years, we just had the shell put up there. I tried to deal right here. I bought thousands of dollars worth of stuff off of Kirshner's in Kansas, and then some in Marshall. And I tried to buy or have some person in the business put the shell up for our new house. I couldn't deal with any of them for one reason or another. One guy said that he was interested, but he never did ever get to it. So we drove finally on our 37th wedding anniversary clear up into Wisconsin and dealt with a company up there, Nordis American Homes. I knew of them a little because they had built Fred McVeigh, I don't know if you know Fred, they built his house about a mile or so south of Westfield. So I knew of them, and we dealt with them. But all we had just had the foundation put in by Eskers at Theotopolis. We had $25,000 lot, concrete work, and so forth before the shell even went up. After the shell went up, this company wanted to do the wiring and the drywalling and this and everything. I said, no, I can't afford to have you do it, and I want to do it myself because I know how I want to do it.
I think.
And that's what I did. Those 3 years of taking care of my TV business and whatever. And then at noon, 1 o'clock, every day nearly, I'd come out and work until 7 or 8 o'clock at night on that house. After a couple of years or more of that, she'd keep saying, "Is the house ready to move into?" No. And it finally got to where she said, "I don't care, I'm moving in anyhow." So it wasn't quite done when we did move in. And we did more after that. You never get one of them done. You never get a house done.
Never perfect.
You never get it done. There's always more to do. So then when I got involved over here, helping on Harlan Hall, I still had things I could do. But she was getting her hair done on that particular Thursday every week. And I walked down one day and met Pat McCammon, had a sign in the window. You know what it said. Volunteers needed. Volunteers aren't paid, they are priceless. Told Pat, I said, "Well, I'm over here anyway, and maybe I could help some." And she said, "We could sure use you." Nobody had any tools except me, you know, really. Jim Schwartz and Charlie Yam and you and I don't know who all. I think Bud Bloodworth was the mayor at that particular time, and later Ken Smith. But I kept a diary, and I think I spent about 6 or 7 years, every Monday, nearly, didn't miss very often, working from 8 to noon, 12:31, helping. And you did some of it.
Yeah, I don't have a diary, but I'm glad you mentioned that.
I
because
do
I was going
have.
to ask you about your involvement there. That a tremendous big help, and it took a
Well, I
lot of
did.
years, but it was great to see it finally take shape.
I did a lot of the electrical work, wiring. I wasn't a great carpenter, but I could.
I don't think they've had any sparks there either.
Well, some of the things that I run into were poorly done. And I remember I had one heck of a time with the 3-way switches on that southeast stairway because I had, I think, 3 or 4 wires come into the box. I had to have a bigger switch box. And I had a devil. I finally got it figured out. But
I think you and Jim Schwartz and I all had all kinds of drawings on the wall and everything else there.
well, I think if you looked at the service panel, the breaker panel, in that little room, you'd probably see my name.
I think so. Well, I know you're certainly a significant part of helping get it done and getting it to completion. Well, Ben, this has been a delight visiting with you.
Well,
kind of reminiscing of
like
some
I
old
say.
things and old parts.
I could go on for another hour, but you know.
There's usually one question I ask about
Okay.
everyone as we're kind of wrapping up. If you're somewhere else in the United States or somewhere else in the world, and you said, "I'm from a little town called Marshall, Illinois," what would you tell them about it and why it might be a good place to be or visit?
Well, I'll tell people that it was not my hometown, but it was my home county seat, and I knew quite a few people. David Lewis, you know him.
Sure do. My neighbor.
I had a run-in, so to speak, with him. My tenants had to sign this lease, which, as I remember, I don't have a copy anymore, stated that this apartment, whatever number it was, is rented only to the immediate intimate family of such and so. This does not include brothers and sisters, fathers or mothers, or any other friends or relation, either more or less distant. And I was mighty happy I had that because a couple of times I had problems with people. What? Huh?
We're gonna have to go to the doctor's office.
Gonna have to go to the doctor's office.
Doctor's office, yeah. Okay.
Well, as I say, Ben, it's been a real delight. I want to thank you for taking the
Well.
time out and being with us and telling your history. And that's exactly what
Well.
the idea is. And I thought maybe we might have this young lady say something over here too.
I don't want to speak right now. I don't talk very good.
She
because of my
got to be
eyesight.
the postmaster in Westfield.
Yes.
About the time
And
that
I've got more to say than what I probably
Yeah,
would
you-
need to say, so.
she's been a wonderful help.
It's been a delight. And again, thank you for taking
Do
the
you
time
wanna-
out. We can put that in the file if you like. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Well, thank you both for being here, and we wish you well. And
thank you for
thanks so
taking the
much.
time and listening to